Hello everybody, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on this winter's night. It's all super dark now. It was a bit lighter last time we saw you, but thank you so much for being with us to look at cultural capital in primary languages. I'm really thrilled to have my colleague Pete with me here this evening. Pete, if you could give everybody a wave. Pete is here with me. Pete is someone who I've got he has the most amazing stories. Fantastic respect for Pete because he has a wealth of international experience, and he's just the ideal person to come and chat about cultural capital with me this evening because he has lived the cultural capital and brought it back to his classroom. So, you know, he's been our blogger extraordinaire and has kind of written about this and shared about this, and it's something that he feels really passionate about. So I'm delighted to welcome Pete with us this evening to talk about it in a little bit more detail. So you've seen me many times before. I'm Bethan. If you've not been to any of our TeachMeets before, I'm the languages product owner, and Pete from my team is one of our editors and bloggers. And with us on the team, we've got a range of writers, editors, designers and illustrators. And between us, the thing that binds us all is a real strong love of language learning, whatever that experience. We've got experience between us from teaching nursery right up to Key Stage 5 languages, from teaching online, from teaching in person, teaching adults even, teaching all around the world. And, you know, we have international designers who are constantly sort of sending pictures of their workplaces in Barcelona or Zurich or interesting places like that. So it's a really international team. And, you know, genuinely, we have a strong passion for culture. And obviously our mission at Twinkl is to help those who teach, and in our team it's to help those who teach languages. But the cultural aspect is something we feel really strongly about because as language teachers, it's something we can embed as part of our practice. There are so many things that we have to do that sometimes can be really difficult or can add extra work to our already busy workload. But sharing a love of culture is probably one of the most joyous aspects of language learning. And also, if you're a hesitant language teacher, by that I mean that you're someone who's perhaps a non-specialist and you know you're having to work really hard to be one step ahead of your class. And to those teachers, I have the ultimate respect for you, and I think you're doing the most incredible job. But this cultural capital aspect of your job is the bit that you can almost, you know, breathe a sigh of relief on, because this isn't going to be testing you and your knowledge, and it's something really fun to find out, and it's a really fun way to kind of bring in. And questions I always have every time, whatever the topic is, well, how do I deal with assessment? Or how do I deal with pupil voice? Or how do I deal with this on the limited curriculum time? Well, culture is something that if you're missing French or Spanish or German or any other language lessons because of SATs or because of a school fete or because of a school trip or any sort of events, and you miss your language slot, then, you know, if you're working on a cultural element, that, you know, is something that you can always pick up on. You can weave it in throughout other subjects. You can make cross-curricular links. You can link it with other foundation subjects, whether it's a Spanish art project that links in, you know, with something that's happening with art, or if it's music, then it could be French music. Just ways of kind of linking things across, which can hopefully make your life a little easier, but also make it loads more fun in the classroom too, and a really vibrant learning atmosphere, which is the most important thing. So what we want to look at tonight is what cultural capital actually means. So culture is part of any language's curriculum at any age. We're going to be talking about culture, even if it's culture as simple as saying, have you ever tasted any French food? Yes, I've had a croissant. That's your sort of minimum kind of culture that we can all kind of add in. But cultural capital as an Ofsted concept, as an educational concept, what is that? What do we do with it? What do we consider? We're then going to have a chat with Pete about his experiences and, you know, his advice and guidance and what he's learnt, and his biggest takeaways about keeping it real, which I think is the most important thing. So it isn't kind of fake culture, that we are trying to keep it real for the children to help them experience something that is beyond their kind of own areas of expertise. And then just some practical ideas and some key events that are great ways to get cultural capital embedded into your curriculum as we go along. So that's what we want to look at this evening. We'll obviously have a couple of pause breaks in between where we've got chances for you to pop any questions in as well and share any great practice that you've done or great experiences, or even any pitfalls or things that have gone wrong. They're always great fun to have a look at and kind of share and talk about. So, you know, feel free to pop those in the chat too, and we can respond to those. So the first thing is, what actually is cultural capital? As a concept, it was introduced by the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu back in the 70s, and it sort of became really prevalent in the 80s, and it was all linked to social mobility. And fundamentally, it's a whole kind of theoretical and academic construct behind social mobility, and the access to how much culture you have in your lives will determine how successful you are in the future. So to an extent, there are potentially negative connotations that could be going with that, because we could be saying if people are living within a certain community where their cultural horizons are limited, their future is then limited. So that there were kind of, it's kind of more of a discussion construct as a concept, really, I think, in terms of how it affects school. And there's a lot more to kind of look at on there. And we'll be sharing a link with you for a blog that Peter's written about cultural capital and what this actually means, where he does actually discuss these kind of ideas in more depth. But really, what matters to us as teachers is what Ofsted, what inspectors actually define as cultural capital. It was added to the inspection handbook in 2019, and this is what it's defined as. So the essential knowledge that pupils need to be educated citizens. So it's engendering appreciation of human creativity and achievement. And really what we're talking about with that is helping them take a step beyond their own experiences, beyond the limitations of the classroom or where they live, and actually, you know, looking beyond that and seeing that culture. So obviously it's a big task to have to do to bring in any school, particularly if you're thinking about a small village school and you're trying to broaden horizons, where there might not be a culture of people leaving that village, they tend to live there, for example, or it might be very different in a large city where you already have an extremely multicultural learning environment, and instantly your classroom is filled with cultures from all around the world that you can share, and the pupils are already having those experiences without you even having to go looking for them. So it can be very, very different depending on your settings, but the important thing is about trying to broaden horizons. And I think the national curriculum for languages probably sums this up the best. So learning a foreign language is a liberation from insularity and provides an opening to other cultures. And really, that's the most important thing to always have at the back of our mind, is this, really. And whether you're teaching in Wales, in Ireland, in Scotland, or anywhere else, this statement is still relevant to you. And if you look at the equivalent statements from the Welsh government, from Scottish languages, they are all saying similar things, that it's about globalizing the future workforce, effectively, not just from terms of them learning a language, but just learning that there is another world out there. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. So even, you know, and this is something, as I've said, that if you are a nervous language teacher because it isn't your area of expertise and you're having to deliver languages, this is something that you can really harness and really build upon and help develop that love of culture and those sorts of things. So it isn't just relegated to a research project, it's actually something that's constantly in it, that's part of the timetable, it's part of the curriculum, that culture is there, and, you know, to bring that in within the school. And it's something that's, you know, really exciting and really wonderful. So before we go any further, if you do have any comments about what you do already for cultural capital, in terms of not just as a language specialist, but just in your school in general, if you have any top tips or anything that you're doing already, please do pop them in the chat and share with us, because they're great for us to share. Because, you know, that's what these meetings are great for as well, is it's not just hearing from us, but also to have the chance to hear from others and other schools and to see what they're doing. And often it's just that reassurance that we need, because you might panic and think, oh my goodness, in the school down the road, their cultural capital is exploding, and in our school it's not. What can we do? Then, you know, please do share some ideas, because sometimes those are the best ways to learn. So if you do have any great expertise or ideas, please do pop them in the chat. They're lovely for us to see. But in terms of what we should be aiming for, cultural capital should reflect the global nature of the languages that we teach. I think something that we've all fallen into the trap of is the very kind of Eurocentric view, which French is in France, Spanish is in Spain. And I say that as the two most commonly taught languages. And I say this as somebody who has stood many times in my life with a French flag around my neck, or with a stripy top on and handing out croissants and baguettes. Yes, that is very much a view of France, and it's great fun and it can be really enjoyable, but it isn't the only view of where French is spoken. So it's always having that mindful. Absolutely, European Languages Day, whole school activities, definitely. We'll be talking about that later, because that's one of the best ways. And I think it's about not limiting that to just Europe, that it's actually, yes, it's the Day of European Languages, but in fact we celebrate all languages on this day, and world languages, and that's really exciting. So it's just about trying to take it a little bit beyond being French in France, Spanish in Spain, and actually looking around. Oh my goodness, this is exciting, having visitors who come in from a different country. Now that's really wonderful. And, you know, sharing culture and historical events, that's a really wonderful thing to be able to do, and extremely fortunate. And it may well be that that's something that you might think about harnessing, that if you have somebody, if you're lucky, on the governing body that you can tap into, because they're sort of obliged to come and help you out with those sorts of things, and that can be fantastic. But really, you need to be looking for a less stereotypical understanding of the target language countries. Now, it's absolutely great fun to have a French event going on, and you've got, you know, the traditional French music going, and you can have your string of onions or your garlic, and, you know, everybody tastes a frog's leg or pretends to, and those sorts of things, and it's brilliant. But there is more to French than that, and I think it's just about expanding the horizons too, to see that France is spoken all around the world, French is spoken all around the world, and, you know, learning a little bit more about that. So trying to avoid the stereotypes, and also adding it into your curriculum. So, you know, as I'm always, my mantra is always kind of skills, not drills, is something that if you've been to a few of my sessions, you hear me saying. But, you know, this is where the culture fits into that as well, because that's something that you take with you. That's a takeaway that you get from that. Whereas, you know, if you're panicking and thinking, I must teach these 10 items of vocabulary, I must now teach these items of vocabulary, I must now teach the rooms of the house, you're actually ignoring the most wonderful things about learning a language, which firstly is communication, and secondly is the culture, or whichever order you put those in. The two most, you know, exciting things are learning about other cultures and learning to be able to communicate. Oh, fantastic. Story afternoon, parents from different countries coming in and reading stories in their native language. That's it. And that's why days like European Day of Languages are wonderful, to be able to hear other voices, to hear other languages being spoken. So, you know, culture isn't just something that you think, oh, I've got to add culture in. It's something, you know, that's embedded into the curriculum. And then making links with other subject areas to see what they're already learning. So if there's an art project, you know, and they're looking at Picasso, then drag that in, you know, that it's looking, or if they were looking at a specific artist, then could, you know, it potentially you speak to the person who's delivering the art and think, well, could we switch that? So it's a French artist, so that, you know, you are linking and you can make the culture in there. We've had some super ideas in the chat. Classes researching different winter traditions in a country, phrases in the language, and shared it with other classes. What a lovely idea. And present perfect presentations about Francophone countries. Absolutely. That's definitely something we would really want to celebrate. And in fact, you know, the aims of what you're trying to do are creating a vibrant learning environment. So that's with your displays. So, you know, we've tried to move ourselves away from French displays always being blue, white, red with a French flag, and making sure that we are incorporating other aspects of French around the world, that it is more of a cultural thing rather than it just being French in France. You know, trying to involve, this is just wonderful, other members of the school community. So fantastic ideas there about parents or visitors coming in to tell stories. What a wonderful thing to do. I saw on social media last week a secondary school that they'd worked with a canteen, and instead of fish and chips on Friday, it was paella. And it was just wonderful to see the pictures, and they had flags up and all sorts of things. So that was really exciting. Whole school events and assemblies, and this is your chance to develop your team of language ambassadors within your school who help to organise these things. You know, celebrating cultural diversity in your school whenever you can. I see that as a really strong aspect of being a languages teacher. And, you know, particularly if you have many children for whom English is not their first language, that's really going to help them welcome and settle as well, if they see how important and how valued home languages are within your school community. And as I said, promoting cross-curricular links wherever you can. So, you know, particularly with PE, sporting events, you know, international sporting events are marvellous for this and great. And, you know, we've seen a couple of ideas in the chat there for Christmas. So with Christmas coming up, what a great idea that it isn't just learning how to say Happy Christmas in French or Spanish, it's researching Christmas around the world. And it doesn't even have to be limited limited to the countries that you're teaching. That is still very much part of a language teacher's remit, to be looking around the world. Don't feel that you have to be, you know, your children are never going to be tested on whether they've learnt to say Happy Christmas, bauble, star, tree, present in French or Spanish, you know, unless potentially at GCSE there's a reading comprehension on Christmas or something. But they're not, you know, they're not going to be turning up in year 7 expected that they can trot out all of this Christmas vocab. So don't be afraid to move beyond that and use Christmas as a great vehicle to, you know, to look at how Christmas is celebrated around the world, not just in France or Spain, not just in the UK, and go beyond that. It doesn't even have to be a country where the language is spoken. Just a great way to develop that culture. And just talking about that, really, we've got some great quizzes. Louise and Emily will put the links in the chat, but we've got some really popular quizzes just to kind of get your class going, really, about where French is spoken and what do you know about Spanish speaking countries, just to learn a little bit more about places where they're spoken. Now, obviously, official languages is a political kind of hot potato, and it isn't something that you can kind of say in quite the same way, you know, oh, these are the official languages, these are the borders, this is exactly it, because these things do fluctuate. But it's more about just having an awareness that there are lots of countries around the world where French and Spanish is spoken, and often it's quite surprising, and it can be really fun to find out a little bit more about those. So those are just some great activities for you to get thinking about those with your class. And really, we've, you know, seen already some great ideas in the chat, but have you had any problems, you know, with approaching this through languages in general or within your school? You know, have you come across any issues? Is it something that you kind of come across some resistance, or is it something that generally everybody is really welcome to? I know that, you know, if you have a very fixed assembly schedule, sometimes it can be really difficult to kind of say, well, please, actually, I want to come in and talk about this event. And it can be hard. And as someone who has always, you know, fought to champion languages, I know that it can be really difficult to do that when there is so much cultural capital within the UK that needs to be explored in terms of developing the cultural capital or British values and all of those sorts of things. So I know then pushing the cultural capital aspect from languages can be tricky too, but it is something that, you know, is really worthwhile. There we go, welcomed, but lack of time can play a part. Absolutely. But, you know, my sort of view is that cultural capital is one thing that you can kind of, if you're struggling to find language teaching time to actually teach aspects of the language, the culture is something that you can bring in into times of ticking the register, or into lunchtime, or into break time, or snack time, or those sorts of things. Culture is something that can fit in much more easily, and you can kind of feel happy as a language lead that you have actually contributed to ensuring that that cultural capital is embedded into the timetable. It is something that happens every week. So, you know, that's the kind of the juggling act, really. And this is the chance, really, that I want to introduce you to my wonderful colleague Pete and some of his experiences, really, because, you know, I have taught all ages across England and Wales. So my international experience is limited to the UK. I've taught English in Spain, but I've never taught languages abroad, or I've never taught primary school abroad in the way that Pete has. So, you know, this is, he has some wonderful experience to share with us, and just some ideas, really. Oh, how lovely. Sally's already said she's got a school in France, which they've given sort of vocabulary for taking the register and lunch choices. That's a lovely idea, and just helps make things a bit more real. So Pete, it's always my voice. It's a real treat for me to welcome somebody else to come to these teacher meets. Would you mind just sharing with everyone just a little bit about your experience, a bit about, you know, where you've taught and where you've lived, just to give everyone a flavour of your international expertise?
Yeah, thank you, Bethany. Well, I worked abroad full-time for about 10 years, and I worked in Jordan, and then I worked in Libya, and then I worked in Slovakia. And I always felt that we were really spoilt with regards to all this cultural capital that we have, because we have schools here that have at least 50 different nationalities. And we would have whole school events that were things like food fairs, where parents would come and, well, members of the whole school community would come and cook for everybody else. And it was like a summer fete, if you like. But you got to taste foods from all over the world, and as a teacher, you were invited by all these parents to say, "Oh, come and taste this, come and taste that." So incorporating cultural capital was sort of, it went with the territory. The children shared it with each other. So events like Children's Day, which is a big thing in Korea, were shared with the children in Slovakia. Things like Teachers' Day, all the, there was always some event, some cultural activity going on from a section of the school community. So, reflecting what you said, Bethany, making the most of what you've got in your school, inviting parents in and all that sort of thing, like Michelle said, whole school activities, fantastic, and making it real. And this is, I think, the way to get your curriculum time back if you find languages squeezed, is to go down this route, see what you've got in your school and see how the people that you have in your school, people coming in and teaching phrases, culture or whatever, just to get that into it. And as I say, I was absolutely spoiled for that. And I loved every single moment of it, because there was always something new to learn, always some new culture to learn. Slovak children who were into K-pop because there was a big Korean community there, because of a car factory in town, all those sorts of things. And then, of course, you get them sharing their cultural events, and even to the extent that by year 6, some of them understood a bit of Korean. Some of the children from other cultures could speak a bit of Korean, and they knew a bit about the culture, and they were friends with them. And this is all the sort of natural way of learning about cultures and languages. And a lot of that is already going on. People teach art, people teach music, so why not marry the curriculums together? So when you're teaching languages, you're teaching about some French, Spanish artists that at the same time that they might be learning a similar topic in other subjects. It's not a thing that's particularly easy if you're in a monocultural environment, which I found quite, I don't know, when I came back to the UK, I was very struck by the fact that there weren't many nationalities in the school that I found myself in. And then you really have to search for how you can integrate it into your teaching. But
that's what I was going to ask you.
Sorry, Bethany, you asked me?
No, that's what I was going to say. That's exactly what I was going to ask you. So when you came back to the UK, how, what insights did you bring with you that you could help coming back to that environment where you didn't have this wealth of culture on your doorstep?
I think it boils down to making it real. I mean, the idea of running a day in which you run a French cafe, for example, and you have activities around that, whether it be art activities, whatever it is. That is one way of getting around it, to make it very hands-on, very practical. I mean, children and food, take them out on school trips, and the thing that they remember is the shop and what they had for lunch, and it's the same thing with languages, I guess. That's one way into it. And the children that love art, okay, they can learn about artists from different cultures, and they can also learn some of the vocabulary that goes with it. When we're talking about language teaching. But I fully recognise that it is really, really hard when you find yourself in a culture that doesn't really have an outward-looking opportunity, if you like. When I came back, I taught in Plymouth, and we walked the class up to the Tamar Bridge, which was only little more than a mile away from their home. But some of the children were gobsmacked. They were saying, "Oh wow, look at that bridge." And you suddenly think, well, the need for cultural capital is enhanced by this, because there's another child who was able to tell you, "Oh yes, that's the Brunel Bridge, and he built the bridge in Bristol." And some children had never seen it before in their lives, let alone come anywhere near Brunel or anything like that. So this is where the levelling up comes in, and this is why I so passionately believe in this, that there are some who who don't have experiences that other children have. And it's there was a big debate about this, about whether we're middle class culture, if you like, to children, and not recognizing other culture that may be going on with the school. And that's sure, that has to be done as well. But we're talking here about a more global outlook. We're talking here about knowing icons of culture in other countries, and that has to be part of language learning. It has to be part of our children's future. Certainly in this global world that we live in, the more children understand about the world, the better equipped they are to survive in it, to thrive in it, to be the best that they can be in the world. And it can come down to things like culture, for example. You know, the cultural things. When I was working in Jordan, in Arabic culture, it's very rude to show your feet, the soles of your feet, to anybody. It's like giving a rude sign in English with your fingers or something. So if you were, for example, in a meeting later in your life, and you were with somebody from an Arabic culture, and they were to cross their legs and one leg at a right angle with your ankle on the opposite knee, showing the sole of their feet, then you would know that they were in some way insulting you. And these sorts of things, you know, I'm not saying that you should teach that in primary schools, but an awareness of culture, the awareness of the best that's awareness that, as Bethan was saying, that this is worldwide, this is global, this is not just to do with France or Spain or wherever you're learning the language in Europe from. And I would highly recommend a spell abroad to see how easy it is in an international school. These are schools that are English speaking, the curriculum is totally taught in English. Also lessons in their native language. So the language environment was fabulous. There were so many languages going on in the school, and such a mix of different cultures and different languages. In the corridors, you would hear different languages being spoken. And as I said earlier, some children would understand words from languages that were nothing to do with anything that was going on in the curriculum. And they would know about the icons of culture, whether it be K-pop or even the festivals that people celebrate. And I just think children gain so much from this. They gain so much in a way that's enjoyable, it's fun, and it equips them for later life. It equips them for the world that they will grow up in. And I think that is the ultimate value of all this cultural capital, which is, I mean, after all, it is a buzzword. It is one of these education things that you hear this thing, cultural capital. But when you get deeper into it, you really do realize the value of it and how much this can give to our children. And in the languages team, we are totally committed to this, that this is what we should be giving our children, and children who may not have had an opportunity to come across these sorts of things before in their home lives, in their education. And I've just been writing a blog about how young you should start to teach languages to children, and looking across Europe and seeing how young they are when they start on this journey, this global journey. And some of them begin, believe it or not, at 3 years old. Now, it's not that it makes you better at a language particularly to learn it younger, but what it does do is it enables you to learn that there is more than the culture that you grew up in. It enables you to be able to speak like a native speaker if you learn young enough. There are many reasons for that. I guess you'll have to read it, it's quite a complicated thing to explain in this short time. But please, if there's anything that's stopping you from embracing cultural capital, then I would welcome your questions, really.
Absolutely. Please do pop any questions in the chat if you have anything for Pete. So as I said, he's always my go-to in the team for these kind of questions, because as you can hear, Pete has lived cultural capital far more than the rest of us. Yes, we've all had stints abroad and done things, but not to quite that extent with that degree of expertise. And I think what's really helpful for us is just that perspective really on seeing how children are learning all around the world as well. And I mean, have you got any top tips, Pete, on how on incorporating culture in lessons, or what teachers can do? Because obviously, the anecdote you shared about the feet, those are brilliant sort of anecdotes, but it can be really hard, or teachers, have got so much to do to find out extra facts or find out these anecdotes. How can we keep it real? How can we get it out there and into the classrooms for it to be kind of something that we can embed? What are your kind of top tips?
I think by making it cross-curricular is the main thing. As a language coordinator, we should be looking at other subjects. We should be having discussions with other subject leaders and seeing what is being taught when, and sort of integrate what's being taught from a cultural capital perspective with the subjects. I mean, art comes to mind that people are studying a work by Picasso or by Van Gogh or wherever, and look at the planning and see where these things can be taught at the same time. I think the other thing is, as I said before, is keeping it real, making it really fun for the children. I think that would be the number one takeaway. How can we make language teaching fun for children? How can we, and cultural is actually the answer, because when it comes to things like football, for example, a resource that I was working on recently was to do with Kylian Mbappé, captain of the French football team. But it was a French resource, and this sort of thing is helping children to understand the culture in the country. That we may have our football heroes in France, but it's real stuff that means things to the children. Boys and girls who play football will be interested in that. I mean, it's you know your class, you know what their interests are, and it's not a great leap to find something from a French, Spanish-speaking country that would dovetail with that. And if you do have any slight connection in the school with anybody from another culture, then sharing that culture, whether it be through cooking some food, whether it be through coming and teaching children, even Key Stage 1 children, teaching them how to say hello and my name is, what's your name in another language. And personally, my view is that it is valuable at a young age. It is valuable to teach Key Stage 1 children because it opens their mind, and they're less inhibited at that point. There is such a world out there, and if you can make it real, if you can integrate it with other areas of the curriculum, if you're very lucky, have somebody come in and talk about their culture, you're onto a winner there. That's a great place to start.
Absolutely. No, I think that's so important, isn't it? Oh, we've got a great question in the chat here.
Natalie's question: should it be explicitly highlighted on plane? Well, yes, it is. It should be, because the reason is that when Ofsted come in, I feel very sorry, come in, then this is a great thing to say to them, that we have this emphasis on cultural capital, and we've looked at our planning, and we've seen where we can integrate capital into our planning, how we can make a bit more equity here for our learners. Just looking at another question here. How do
Yeah, and I would say with linking in that capital as well, I think because that really helps you, that if you have quite a disjointed timetable because of circumstances beyond your control, that kind of cultural element is something that you can really work on there. And it is part of the national curriculum. That is the aim, is to foster pupils' curiosity and develop their understanding of the world. So it is a kind of two-pronged thing. And that's a brilliant question here about how do the specific elements of cultural capital directly support the teaching and learning of MFL? Well, it's about making links. So it's cultural links through the language. So for example, this is something I live in Wales, so my children have had to learn Welsh at primary school, despite not being Welsh, because I speak Welsh myself, but my children don't, and they've had to kind of learn that. And something that's always done is that links are always made, such as, oh, in Wales they say it this way, do we do it like that? What's the same with the word? So it's about the cultural links of the language. And for example, the French idea of having tu and vous. So you have a formal you and an informal you. Well, that's a fantastic way for talking about the culture, because there's a grammar point that comes with that, but you're also talking about the fact that there is a slightly more formal way of greeting people, and that is an essential cultural part of the language. So learning about masculine and feminine in French and Spanish, that's cultural as much as it is linguistic, because it's quite a cultural phenomenon, because that is alien to us in English. So it is something that we can kind of learn. So, you know, I would argue that those kind of grammatical aspects, particularly even some of the more complicated ones, if you get further down the road at sort of GCSE and A level, that are very much unique to those languages, those are a strong part of the culture too. And it's also a case of, you know, reflecting on that language, and it's making those links and saying, well, we use this word in French, what would you use in English? So, you know, we were looking at some work on colours recently, and a colour would be, you know, would be an adjective, but it's also a noun. If you're saying, well, I like red, and it was the construct of word classes that children would understand, and it's linking that across to English. So it's that cultural knowledge of the language as much as it is of, you know, not just learning about the food and drink, but also about the culture of those sorts of things. So, you know, you would learn greetings in France, in French, and you would learn that there are there's a more informal greeting, or in Spanish that, you know, you might have a good day and a good afternoon. Well, you know, there's a cultural element of that, because people in Spain might be going out for their evening paseo and their sort of their walk of an evening, and then they would say good evening, and that would be far more common to say. So it's linked to the culture there. So I think it just goes hand in hand, and I think it's more of the case that we're just trying to say that we want it to be embedded, and it sort of links with that, but in an extremely packed timetable and an extremely packed curriculum, it's about fighting for what you can do with language. So if you're unable to teach items of vocabulary, then teaching the culture is at least giving them that awareness and that culture and that curiosity. And it's useful that they've learnt about masculine and feminine in French, and that's actually more useful than having learnt 10 random words that they might not need in the future. So it's about, you know, finding time for both and making sure that there is that spot for it. But culture is the culture of the language is what I would argue, as much as it is the food and the drink and the customs. But you know, in French with greetings, for example, it's very common to kiss people on both cheeks with a greeting. Well, that ties in with learning the language at the same time, and the kind of slightly more formal, you know, you've got a formal please and an informal please in French. Well, again, that's a cultural thing. That's just not something that we have. So, you know, it's the culture of saying, well, you'd use this word to talk to your head teacher, but you'd this word to talk to your friend. There's that kind of cultural aspect of it, I would say. Have you got anything else to add to that, Pete, really?
Yeah, the specific elements of cultural capital directly supporting teaching and learning, I think it's almost like, I see it as a sort of golden hook, really. I mean, you as Bethan said, you can teach colours through looking at artworks, and there are many other ways that you could think creatively. Okay, that's what I want to teach in languages, and vocabulary is not specified in the national curriculum. They haven't got to learn colours and greetings and things. There's no prescription that they should learn that. You can decide that for yourself. But the business about the hook is about making it real and enjoyable and fun, and that's how it supports the teaching and learning of MFL, I would say.
And also because, you know, we want to encourage communication. So as Pete mentioned about having a French cafe, what more fun way can there possibly be to be communicating in French than to be asking for your food and drink, or to be serving it and using the language in that way at the same time. So it's finding those opportunities that develop both of them, really.
Yeah, and if you pre-talk that language, whether you're acting in the role of one of the waiting staff, whether you're adding up the bill, you're dealing with numbers, then this is a great opportunity to put that in practice, that you've taught them numbers, you've taught them greetings, you've taught them polite phrases, you've taught them food vocabulary, and then they go and put it in a cafe. And then your cultural capital is supporting the vocabulary, the language, the structures, the sentence structures, the grammar that they've learned, and they find that it becomes useful, it becomes real. And that I would say is how it directly supports MFL teaching and learning.
Absolutely, and even down to the simplicity of un croissant. The T at the end of croissant is a silent T. There's your phonics lesson for the day. Can we find out some more words with a silent T in French? Or baguette, for example, the E at the end, you don't hear the E, it's a silent E at the end. Have we got more examples? So it's just finding opportunities in that way too. Oh, brilliant, using bingo to help with numbers. Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you know, it's those sorts of things that make it really fun as well, and that children remember. But, you know, it doesn't always have to be, you know, the teaching and learning, it can be about the pronunciation as well. It can be about the phonics. So you can find a way to work the phonics in with this, then that's another way to embed it with the culture, really. So thank you. If you have any more questions, please do pop them in the chat, and we'll keep answering as we're going along. And similarly, if you have any success stories or anything else to share, please do pop them in the chat, and Pete and I will answer those. But as we've sort of said, you know, do look at what you already do and think about how just a change of angle. We're not saying you have to go away and reinvent your curriculum, but finding a change of angle really to incorporate a cultural element, and ask pupils for their input. Find out what expertise you have amongst the staff, and not just your teaching staff, school staff, you know, within the canteen. Is there somebody with great cooking experience that could make something specific for you that would be really wonderful to taste? Or, you know, is there somebody who's a musician within your staff who can help with some music, etc., those sorts of things. But we have this really great CPD pack on developing cultural capital, which is written by Pete and has loads of top tips and some information on that, and some resources and ideas, and that's really helpful, as well as heading to our languages resources, where we have a wealth of cultural resources that just can help you to kind of come about it in a way, and also to think about pupil voice really, and asking your pupils and thinking about that as part of it. That's a great way to show that you're incorporating cultural capital, is to embed that in your pupil voice. So rather than it just being, you know, what do you like about French, or what have you learnt, then actually, what do you know about the culture? What do you know? How much would you like to know? Where, you know, what sort of events would you like? And use pupil voice as your vehicle to help develop your cultural capital too, because then you've actually got evidence as well, and you've got, you know, something to feed back to your, you know, constantly developing curriculum and your subject leadership file. So it's a win-win in all respects there, really. In terms of practical ideas and things that you can take just to sort of embed these as part of what you're doing, just simply quickly discussing similarities and differences, you know, about the school day in France. Well, it's pretty common in France that they'll have Wednesday afternoons off in school, or Wednesdays off, but they might be in school till later in the day. Or, you know, the way that they loop their handwriting can be different, or the subject that they study, or they might go home for lunch. It's just those little things that that's embedding your cultural capital. So when you're skirting school subjects, you just talk a little bit about school in France. You know, anecdotes and stories are wonderful. And it can be, even if you're talking about, you know, something that you're learning, you can compare it to a different culture too, because we're just talking about broadening horizons and understanding that things are done differently elsewhere, and let's learn about that. It's really exciting. We've got loads of resources on history and culture and festivals and celebrations, which are wonderful ways to kind of embed that. But music and dance is just a fantastic way. So if you're having a movement break, find a French song, find a Spanish song, find a song from any culture, and have your movement break to that. You know, find a music video on YouTube and dance to that. What a, you know, a great thing here. Yeah, we've got some ideas in the chat then of some easy French songs, which are really nice as well. You know, learning traditional dances, that can be really fun as well. And there's so many free things available on YouTube that you can use to help you. And, you know, that's great to tie in with PE then as well. And it can be a great project as well for people to find and research for traditional dance and to learn it and to share it. Cooking challenges or food tasting, you know, as Pete has said, well, those are great kind of projects and people can bring things in, especially with, you know, Bake Off at the moment. Well, what a great idea. Pete?
Yeah, just a top tip for food things. Most supermarkets are community champion. If you were to go to your community champion at the supermarket and say you were running a cultural day and you were looking for foods from the countries, then you may be able to.
Absolutely. No, definitely go to try to see what you can get for freebies. Wonderful. Oh, fantastic. I love that. Ghostbusters in French. What a great idea. Absolutely great idea. But you know, food tasting, cookery challenges, great. You know, the you know, oh, how wonderful, learned a French song to present to parents. Absolutely. So it's incorporated in those sorts of ways. That can be really lovely too. Passport stamps, so you could make a little passport, and you know, as you're traveling around French countries through your knowledge, you put a stamp in the passport, or when they've learned something about certain countries, you have a passport, you know, so you have a learning passport, and it's not just about the language but about the culture. Money is a really interesting one too, and it's so easy to find, you know, pictures of money that you can print out and use. Children are fascinated by money around the world, and that's really interesting to see that things, you know, different currencies, and to talk about that as well, particularly when things go into the thousands. That's always wonderful. That's always very exciting when you can have high value notes, for example. Travel brochures are a simple one. There can't be many language teachers who've not, you know, I remember years of, you know, coming home from town with my arms filled with travel brochures. But you know, I used to go and teach Spanish as part of a Hello Mexico module in my local primary school. And that was always part of that was always planning a trip to Mexico, where children had a tourist brochure. They had to find the route, they had to find where they were going, they had to find the day trips you were going to do. And that's a really exciting way to look at it as well. And in fact, you know, my son, as part of a sort of cultural critical thinking aspect, even at A level, is having to do something similar as part of a sort of extended curriculum project to plan on this. So it isn't just something that's just for young children. It's actually all the way through that you do sort of see that. Bastille celebrations absolutely are wonderful. Show and tell. Can children bring something in? So if they've, you know, this is a tricky one because you don't want to kind of disadvantage any children who've perhaps not traveled, but it can be a show and tell of something that they found online. So it's not someone sharing an experience from a holiday that they've been on, but something that they found, or something that they've made and they've come in and they show it in. That can be really exciting. Cultural games and sports, you know, that's wonderful. And particularly when the Tour de France is on, well, that's a great thing to stop and look at. Or the French Open tennis, or, you know, if there's you know, how are the Spanish team or the French team doing in the World Cup or in the Euros, you know, all of these sorts of things. These events are perfect to kind of seize upon. Myths and legends too, you know, especially with you know, storytelling is always marvelous. Well, it doesn't have to be in the foreign language, but you can obviously find, you know, any fairy tales that are popular from French culture and share those, and that can be really fun too. A fashion show is always a great one, you know, particularly if you have anything, you know, around the school. You know, I remember going to a great production at my children's school, in fact, of Christmas Around the World, where they were singing songs from, it was one of my favorite shows I went to, where they were celebrating Christmas around the world, and children are all dressed up in all sorts of wonderful costumes. Oh, see, yeah, stories, so such as The Hungry Caterpillar, so familiar stories that are translated and you can read in parallel. Well, that's a great way to look at culture. As I said about travel, brochures, you know, planning a journey is great. Arts and crafts are fantastic. We've got loads of things on Twinkl for, you know, making an Eiffel Tower out of straws, for example, or looking at these sorts of things. We talked about etiquette and manners, so that's the tu and vous in French, for example. Or Pete, would you say about the soles of the feet being rude in certain countries? So have they, you know, and again, extend it beyond France and Spain. It can just be anywhere around the world. What's different, you know, because that's what we're doing with learning a language. We are fostering that curiosity. And school days, you know, what can be more real for children than school? That is one experience that they all have, irrespective of what goes on when they leave the door. They're all at school. So comparing their school day to a school day in France, or a school day in Africa, or a school day in Mexico, is a direct comparison that they can understand. So finding those pictures online, finding that, you know, that is one of the easiest kind of, you know, character ways to do it. I've just seen the word gangster hamster and I'm not going to get that out of my mind tonight. What a wonderful term. It's just marvelous. So we've got some fantastic links and things that people are sharing in the chat. We're so grateful for those. That's really helpful. Thank you so much for sharing those. Please do continue, because it's just wonderful for everyone else to share ideas of what you're doing and what's successful, because by no means is this an exhaustive list. These are just ways to get going. And you know, if you're kind of stuck and you don't know what to do, some key dates, you know, European Day of Languages is the biggie. I talked about this before in another CPD, but you know, this is, as a language teacher, this is your Christmas. European Day of Languages. It's the biggest day of the year, certainly for us and our team. We're really busy, and it's not just about, yes, the day was created to celebrate languages in Europe, but actually, you know, I use that day to talk about languages of the world and celebrating any languages. International Mother Language Day is growing massively, particularly popular with EAL teachers too, because it's celebrating home languages. And this is wonderful because it gives you a chance to bring in anybody linked to your school who might have a different language, which is fantastic. Europe Day is another great one to learn about countries of Europe. World Day for Cultural Diversity, for dialogue and development, which is fantastic. For talking about what cultural diversity is and why that's important. And these resources work really well as assemblies as well. So, you know, you can be ticking your cultural capital box whilst also developing, you know, the curiosity of your children and the desire to learn more, which I think is what we're aiming for. Some fantastic events. You know, Day of the Dead has really captured the imagination of people all around the world as such a fascinating festival. But the origins of the festival and the reasons behind it are absolutely fascinating. And even if you're not studying Spanish, then why not learn a little bit about Day of the Dead and learn some Spanish words to go with it? That's a fantastic thing to do. You know, and then other events that may not be typically French or Spanish or, you know, events, nevertheless, why not, things that you might be celebrating through school, look at how you can incorporate a linguistic element, such as Pride Month. We've got Pride Month resources in French and Spanish, because languages are all about broadening cultural horizons. Could there be a better set of resources to accompany that, really, to talk about breaking down barriers? It's just wonderful. Ramadan and Eid, particularly if you're teaching in larger cities where you have many children whose family members will be fasting, for example, it's really important to understand about that. Well, learning about that with a French aspect and learning about French speaking cultures where that is taking place is a way of learning about that too. And you're covering the culture and you're covering the languages. Absolutely, lots of languages speak French, so linking to other countries, absolutely. Black History Month is another one, you know, talking about, not that that's something that you only want to limit to a month, and obviously we have the Black representation curriculum as well at Twinkl as part of that, but you know, just to bring the French element through that. Pete talked about Kylian Mbappe, for example, and other French stars that are really great to talk about. You know, that can be a way to look at things. You know, bringing in other festivals. Bastille Day, this is your chance to get your French flags out and your croissants, your French cafe. Absolutely go full French flags for the Bastille Day celebrations, full red, white and blue. But, you know, great activity, great chance. And actually the history aspect of Bastille Day is super useful too. And that massively broadens the culture, because it's like, oh my goodness. And then you just talk about the national anthem in French and why potentially the national anthem is rejected by people in France because of the connotations and the history. Just a little debate about that, and then you have a debate about our own national anthem and should we change it. And that's culture, that's your cultural capital. You know, it goes beyond that. Las Fallas is a fantastic festival in Spain with these just enormous kind of papier-mâché kind of giant puppetry and stuff. It's just incredible, and that's just fascinating to look at, and you can learn a bit about that. You know, if you're bringing in cultures, you talked about Christmas, well, New Year, you know, Spanish culture, for example, eating a grape on every chime of midnight. Everyone's always fascinated by that story and why they do that. Epiphany and the Three Kings, which is widely celebrated in France and Spain. Again, really fantastic to talk about, because, well, why are they celebrating that? What is happening? What are the reasons behind it? Great things to talk about. You're learning some language, you're learning about the culture. you know, all part of just an ordinary day that is happening, you know, all around there. And we talked about French speaking countries. Well, obviously French speaking African countries in particular, you know, that there's, you know, African World Heritage Day, for example, can be a great one to look at, and then to look at through France, through French speaking eyes, and countries that speak French. You know, it's a really great way to do that as well. We've got an absolute wealth of cultural resources to help you, really. We've got a range of culture concept videos where we're sort of explaining, you know, these things, and these are fantastic. We've got recipes, we've got song packs, we've got a new resource. It was made for the European Day of Languages, but this could be used at any time of year, which is a tour of Europe. And that gives you 3D, I can't think of the word, 3D models of the Eiffel Tower, of the Champs-Élysées, of the Arc de Triomphe, for example, to actually give your children a bird's eye view of some places around Europe, which is really exciting. Those are great ways to bring it into. So we do have a wealth of resources that you can look at to help you develop this as part of your timetable, as part of your curriculum. And, you know, if you do have anything that you'd like to share in the chat about any of your tips, thank you so much for everything that you've shared already. It's been super useful. But if you do have anything further to add, please do add it in there, or any pitfalls or anything that you felt that you've done that's been particularly successful or has been something that you wouldn't want to repeat. Please do share those, because it is wonderful to share your expertise. But, you know, that concludes us, really. I think cultural capital is something, you know, I hope you can tell from the way you're talking that, you know, Pete and I are genuinely really passionate about this, and we believe really strongly in the importance of cultural capital. And yes, it's a construct now that Ofsted have identified and put in the handbook, but as a language teacher, it's beyond just a box ticking thing. It's actually something that we believe should be, you know, at the heart of all languages. It's embedding that love of learning and that love of languages, really, and culture. How wonderful. Absolutely. Google Maps, what a great place to start. Climbing the Eiffel Tower, looking at all of those. Absolutely wonderful. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. If you do have any questions for myself or Pete, please do pop them in the chat, and when we stop recording, we'll hang around if you do want to ask any questions as well. Pete, do you have anything else to share as we finish?
Well, not to share, but just I've been the comments have been fantastic, and the sharing. So just to say thank you to everybody who's given up an evening to come and do some work, really.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your ideas and the tips. As I said, you know, we want you to use these as opportunities to share good practice, you know, with each other as well, because that's really helpful. Do fill in the form, which Louise has just put in the chat, because you will get your free Twinkl mug posted out to you next month. So it's definitely worth you filling in that, because they do keep your tea and coffee warm. I have to say, they are pretty good. So I do recommend them. But thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back in December to talk about the 3 pillars. So vocabulary, phonics and grammar, and how we put that in our curriculum. So yeah, looking forward to that one, because that's really important. But thank you all for joining us, and do look out for the email where you have this sent through to you, and obviously keep looking out for our CPD, because we're adding to it constantly with things that will be useful for you. So thank you.